So this meeting is now being recorded. Thank you for attending the fifth and final chat. We have had, well, for me, speaking for myself, we've had a great time together, and I've enjoyed the interaction throughout the 4 weeks and in these chats. So I hope that we can have the same in this discussion. So as we close out the course, for this week, you're going to look at the lean processes from a supply chain perspective. And within this week, you're going to read chapters 8 and 9. You're going to continue to work on your IntelliPath assignments. If you have any assignments that you still have to complete from a assignment perspective and from a IntelliPath perspective, you were will to you have until the last day to complete those. Okay. Also, for this recording, if you're listening to this recording, you have until next Wednesday to support that to submit that extra credit. And again, for any other assignments, you will incur a late penalty for any assignments that you have yet to submit. Okay. And also, you have up until the end of the week to complete the course survey. Please do that. In that, I use that feedback for future courses in terms of what to include and how to make the learning experience better for other students. So for this week's assignments, you are to reflect back on everything that we've discussed in the previous weeks, whether it's the foundations of supply chain management, international supply chain management, supply chain strategy, key performance indicators, and the like. And you are to talk about which concepts that you find to be most applicable to your role, to find to be most applicable to your goals once you complete the program. Okay. Also, I would like for you to reflect back on, what benefits it has just outside of the course content. What types of approaches are you able to transfer out of the work environment into the day-to-day environment? We're going to talk about lean processes today, and I've heard people, and I have myself, found ways to eliminate wasteful activities in my day-to-day life. I've found ways to, eliminate processes using the principles in which we're going to talk about today. From a KPI and business analytics perspective, that's just I've kind of transferred my way of thinking, and I've set personal goals and set those smart goals, if you will, those goals that are specific in nature, right? So if I want to publish, by 2021, I want to say, okay, how many articles do I want to have peer reviewed and published? What level of journals do I want to publish in? So from a personal perspective, outside of my business environment, you look at the things that we have talked about, and you transfer them to your personal goals. Yeah, so Joseph, yeah, you use those SMART goals every single day. And one thing that I talk to students about is you know strive for stretch goals, right? Those goals that you think are unreachable. If you are striving to those goals, you will get pretty close to them, right? Without doing those stretch goals, you're kind of in a way being complacent in nature. I keep going back to I mean, it was always a goal of mine to do, TED Talks, and I wanted to do one by the end of 2019, right? So that was my stretch goal. I didn't think I could attain that, but I ended up doing five of them. So if I work toward that goal, you may get close to that goal, you may exceed that goal, right? And now, because of the relationships that I built in doing those talks, I am now organizing a talk in March of 2021. I am. So if you go to my LinkedIn profile, you will see an announcement was the day I posted an announcement today for one of the speakers. We have the student body president from MIT. We are talking with the student body president of Yale, and we have a team of students from Penn State that are using artificial intelligence to reduce illiteracy in Africa. Yeah, so we are the theme is the young, the undiscovered. So we are taking probably some of the most biggest thought leaders in higher education today, and we are bringing them together in Pennsylvania on one stage for 6 hours. So again, that was a goal of mine, and within 3 months, because I was working toward that goal, I exceeded the expectations. I exceeded the expectations by the caliber of speakers that we're going to have at this event. And it goes back to what are the takeaways from this course, that are going to be applicable and it's going to be meaningful to the goals that you have set for yourself. Um, and also, what approaches from this course will be applicable to your personal and professional lives as well. Again, anything else you would like to share is going to be a part of this assignment this week. So, as the second part of the assignment, I think that it's very meaningful to read through each one of your peers' submissions to say, what resonated with you? What can you learn from them? I would say that this is probably the most engaging assignment of the course in that we all have different backgrounds, we all have different experiences, and one's goals will kind of trigger your thought process. It's going to increase that collaboration among each other so that you can kind of use that as fuel to reassess your goals. I always say that you always want to strive for continuous improvement, which is one thing we're going to talk about tonight. So I always say to please continue to review everyone's submission so that you can look to see if it's beneficial to you. Okay. Any questions on this week's assignment? Okay. So, as we talk about lean organizations, once again, I hope that we have an engaging conversation tonight. So, for lean, what is your definition of lean? Yes, Lauren. So, waste reduction. Yes. And I like how you say you just left it at waste because a lot of people say, oh, okay, I want to reduce waste from an inventory perspective. Well, that's only one aspect of it, right? I want to reduce waste from an inventory perspective. I want to reduce waste from a scrap perspective. I want to reduce waste from a process perspective. Okay, and being lean is getting to the bone of your business. So what do you mean by that, Angela? Because I think that whenever you say from what I'm understanding from this is that you're getting to the primary objectives, if you will, right? We want to understand what the goal is. We don't want to add fluff to the goal, So the primary objective for Lean is to essentially reduce waste, right? So what are our goals? What is the minimum to get to those goals, for example, right? So lean was a so to provide some background, lean was born out of the Toyota production system. So within the course content this week, you're going to hear a lot of reference to TPS, or the Toyota production system, where Toyota was seeing a lot of unneeded processes in manufacturing a vehicle, for example, right? So they tried to develop a process to say, how do we reduce waste from a step by step perspective in producing a car? How do we reduce the level of inventory that we're holding for a particular car? And instead of depending on what we refer to as a push system, what we refer to as our forecast, where we are essentially guessing how much we're going to use, we're guessing how many cars we're going to produce, how many sub-assemblies we need. We are trusting the system, and we are using the system to tell us when we need to produce our cars. We're using the system to tell us when we need to order new product. We're using the system to tell us when we need to bring in more workers for an organization. So that is where the lean thinking was born. And to give you additional insight, lean was kind of brought to the U.S. by Jack Welch whenever he worked for GE. So Jack Welch is known as the CEO of the century. And Jack Welch is also known for firing about 100,000 people within GE during his time. Where Jack's philosophy was, if it does not produce value, it's gone, it's out, it's cut, right? So whenever you hear of lean within your organization, you will probably hear about Toyota, you will probably hear about GE, you will probably hear about Jack Welch, because he made lean mainstream from a process perspective, from a managerial perspective. Okay. So if we look at this slide here, it's the approach to create value through everything that we do. So the whole lean thinking concept is, whenever we do a process, we always ask ourselves, is this creating value for our customer? Right? Are we maximizing our efficiencies within the organization? Okay. So and in order to do that, we always have to reflect back, always have to pivot to say, okay, we established this process, but how can we make it better? One of Jack Welch's key mottos was find a better way every day. Yes, we improved this process last week, but how do we make it better? Right? Continuous improvement. Okay. So the building blocks of lean, as we said, was this lean production that goes back to that to the production system. It's also total quality management. We're going to get to that in more detail shortly, but the whole total quality management aspect comes into play, where quality is not just the quality department's responsibility, it's the organization's responsibility. And what I mean by that is that we look with every department within the organization to get their inputs into a product or service. We want to see, okay, what's finance's thoughts on this? What is engineering's thoughts on this? What's sales thoughts on this? So now we're collaborating to provide that most valuable product or solution for the organization that provides the highest level of value to the customer. Okay. And then the third component of lean is that respect for people. And I think that this is the most important part, in that without the people, there's no product. Without the people, there's no service. Without the people, there's no company. right? So you have to have that respect for people within the organization so that you can harness that creativity and innovation that will lead to those increased efficiencies, right? I.e., which is ultimately lean thinking. So let me see what the any questions, any comments while I'm going through the chat. Correct. So getting past the meat or the fat and recycling parts and replenish to reuse expenditures within the business. Yes. So Angela, you are correct. We are going to we're cutting the fat. We're getting directly to the objectives, the processes, the products that will only provide value to the customer, right? Value added activities. We want to eliminate the non-value added activities. Gathering information to always upcycle and use, not discard the works of fuels, oils, and back to the preventative care measure. So gathering information to always upcycle and use, not discard the works of fuels. Yeah, so that data gathering, we're going to talk about that when we get to the domain approach, where that data gathering is a primary piece to developing a lean process as well as that continuous improvement piece that I was referring to. Received my Duran Lean Six Sigma yellow belt. You went to Georgetown? An unscheduled repair. Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah, I'm actually creating the Masters in Supply Chain Management program at Georgetown right now. Unscheduled repair with fresh part. So yeah, so going on to that part. So if you go into LinkedIn, I just posted a webinar that we're doing in the supply chain program where we're collaborating with the cybersecurity program at the Georgetown Graduate School. So it's free. So if you go there, click the link within my LinkedIn profile, you can attend a free webinar within the Georgetown Supply Chain Program, which is kicking off in about 3 weeks. Very excited about that. Unscheduled repair with the fresh part that is not valued. So unscheduled repair. So let me talk about that for a second because that's something I just talked about a couple weeks ago. So within this preventative maintenance aspect, we are taking this lean thinking to another level. Okay, so we've all heard of preventative maintenance, I should say. We've heard preventative maintenance, but studies have shown that preventative maintenance actually increases costs as opposed to reduces cost. Because although you're putting additional time in preventative maintenance, organizations still have machine breakdowns, right? So we're now taking this a step further with the introduction of artificial intelligence and machine learning. We are now implementing something we're referring to as predictive maintenance. Okay, so we are collecting data from these machines. We are analyzing and measuring how often these machines break down, and we're using that data to predict when these machines are going to break down, which is when we're going to perform maintenance on these machines. Okay, so I probably talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning in probably every other chat, but it is the future and it is something that we're doing to kind of reduce these costs. So whenever we talk about lean, we're now also introducing technologies such as AI and ML because we're going to collect that data and make these operations more efficient. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, so large trucking is going to use artificial intelligence in Texas. Yes, absolutely. Artificial intelligence is also being used for truck driver safety, where you're trying to Again, predictive maintenance. You are trying to predict when those truckers are going to get tired, for example, and you're going to look at that trucker's driving history, right? You're going to track, that driver's actions or behaviors in real time, and you're going to collect that data. You're going to do what we call cluster that data, and you're going to predict or suggest when that truck driver should pull over and take a nap. Okay, so that is what we're doing in terms of artificial intelligence within the trucking industry, and companies are already using it. Look at Uber, Lyft. Uber and Lyft have been using artificial intelligence and machine learning for years. How do you think that peak pricing comes into play? Uber and Lyft have been collecting this data. They cluster this data, and they can see, okay, in Manhattan, these are the times where we have all these drivers. We're going to up the price. So that's just one example of how AI and ML are already being used today, and we're now transferring that to the supply chain industry. So going on to lean production. Again, we talked about lean production, the Toyota production system, and what that lean production concept is referring to is something that we talk about with just in time. And just in time, we talked about that pull production where we are relying on the system to give us signals or triggers and when we need to order products. And this just-in-time system. So I use the example of a two-bin system. A two-bin system is used a lot within the manufacturing industry, where I essentially will have, I don't know, a box of screws. I'll have two boxes of screws, and once that first box is used up, then that's my trigger or my signal that I need to order another box of screws. And then once I place that order from that trigger from this third replacement box of screws, as I'm using up that second box of screws, that third box shows up just in time, just when I need it. So that's essentially that just in time model where I am using triggers, using signals to tell me when it's time to order products, as opposed to me forecasting how many screws I need and then just having inventory stored and being not used, taking over inventory space. And in a to kind of validate this two-bin system point, I use, in the healthcare industry, we can use the same exact two-bin system for flu vaccines. So instead of me looking at my previous year's forecast during flu season and say, okay, I used 10 cases of flu vaccine last year. I'm going to buy 12 cases in October for the whole year, for the whole entire flu season, right? So I'm guessing that I'm going to use 12 cases. Let's just say hypothetically, that this is a mild flu season. Taking COVID out of it, this is a mild flu season. I only use 4 cases. Now I'm throwing away 8 cases of flu vaccines. That's tens of thousands of dollars I'm just throwing away. As opposed to me using a two-bin system for my flu vaccine. I have a two-bin system. Once that first case of flu needles are used up, that's my signal. I need to order another case, right? So now, worst case, once flu season is over, worst case, I'm only throwing out 1 case. Worst case scenario, right? So you can see I'm only writing off 1 cases versus 8 cases. And if I magnify that by an organization that carries thousands of items, that's millions of dollars. Okay. So that is that just in time model, and that's why organizations find a lot of value in that it reduces waste from an inventory perspective that saves them millions of dollars, and also it's going to save me inventory handling costs. So instead of me having a team of 40 people moving inventory, right, because I have thousands of items where I'm storing, I'm guessing on these thousands of items I'm going to use it. By me using the system signals to tell me when I need to buy it, I have cut that overhead. I've cut those number of workers probably to a tenth, right? And this whole lean system is not about eliminating jobs. It's about finding more value added roles for the organization. It's more about job enrichment for those workers, right? Because those workers will be leading to innovative ideas, right? So and I always talk about this with artificial intelligence. We are not going to be eliminating jobs with artificial intelligence. We are going to make those jobs and roles for those current employees easier. Okay, they're going to eliminate those repetitive day-to-day monotonous processes, and now they can focus on the more meaningful revenue generating processes. And it's the same thing with lean, because we have eliminated wasteful activities. Now they can focus on more profitable activities for the organization. Okay, so there's a few things that came in through here. And keep the comments coming, please. Getting correct information. Getting the correct information to the general public to remote to fear. Yes, so correct information to the product. That is true. So again, to that point, this whole artificial intelligence concept is also important in that you're not relying on individuals creating those reports, and those reports. We don't know the validity of those reports. In that, okay, I want my company to look at this. I'm gonna modify this report. But with artificial intelligence, we can have controls in place where you can't modify that data, right? It's the same thing in the trucking industry. You can't. So whenever you had those paper driving logs, I could report it exactly. I could report what I wanted to when I'm driving. I want to make a little extra money. I drove 14 hours. I'm only reporting 8, right? But now with this artificial intelligence, now we're getting real time data fed into our systems to tell me exactly how many hours I drove, if there's any kind of issues, any kind of erratic driving or things like that. So that's where this technology is going to be very important, and that's where again it goes back to lean thinking, right? I'm eliminating wasteful activities. I'm eliminating those paper driving logs, right? So that's going to make things more efficient. It's going to reduce the amount of errors. It's going to make things more accurate. Oh, any good CR system will track. Yeah, any CR system will track your low side. That is correct. CRM's going that goes back into those metrics and KPIs. Don't overthink the process. Always keep your eye on the numbers. And yeah, so yes, you want to keep your eye on the numbers, but you also, so going back to that metrics and KPIs discussion, the numbers should only be one aspect of it. I cannot stress that enough. I'm actually working. I was actually working with some of my people today. In that, we were looking at reports, and someone came to me and said, "Okay, why is this person's numbers low?" Well, he's been working on a project for me for 3 weeks, right? That's why his report's low. So you have to, and the point I'm trying to make is you have to look at they take it from a mixed methods approach. So we have to look at the quantitative data being the numbers, and the qualitative data in terms of interviews and peer reviews and things like that. So I was interviewed about a person's numbers, and I told, their manager that he was working on something for me for, another project. So that kind of justifies those low numbers, right? He's working on an internal project. Okay. So that mixed methods approach is very important. Challenging healthcare where employees stay a long time and some of the workforce is resistant to learning. So Lauren, to that point, so when people are, and this is a, I would say, one of the most common flaws in terms of organizational change, where people who are resistant to learning, don't understand the why. And I always say to leaders, you have to tell them the why. And I say this multiple times throughout courses where whenever I'm doing a Gemba walk, we're going to talk about Gemba walks here because that's a lean process. So a Gemba walk is essentially where we will work with leaders and we're going to go through each department within the organization. And we're going to understand that employee's processes. And we're going to ask the employee, what are your bottlenecks? What do you do? What did you do today? What are your bottlenecks? Once we understand there's bottlenecks, then we let that employee know, okay, there's change coming. And we're going to say what that change is, and we're going to say how we're going to get there, and that's going to be with the employee. And we're also going to say how it's going to positively impact that employee. And that last point is one of the most important points because most people are resistant to change because they don't know the why. And they don't know, well, how's it going to benefit me? Right? And that is very important regardless of organization, I would say 90% of leaders do not communicate that. They just say, okay, change is coming, you're having this training, that's the end of it. Right. But the missing piece to that puzzle to get adoption, to get buy-in, is to let the employee know how is it going to positively impact them. Okay. Accountable for employees and quality of work. So yeah, so Angela, that's an excellent point in that shared accountability is very important. Where if you make the employees accountable and once you tell them how's it going to positively impact you, that's where you go in and say, it's going to make your job easier, and two, we're going to share these successes. So once this project is successful, you're going to have additional job opportunities. We're going to have a profit sharing for a particular initiative. Like, so if we have a sales department and we are implementing Salesforce, for example, our CRM application, if we see a 10%, I don't know, 10% increase in close rates, we can work with leaders to say, if we see an increase, we're going to share these profits with the employees. And now you're incentivizing adoption. Some people aren't fans of that, but I am, because if you incentivize, it's a win-win. It's a win-win. So that incentivizing is an approach that I've used. I've had people to say, well, whenever you try to incentivize, employees try to game the system, and then once they receive that bonus, then they stop trying. Right? I've not seen that. I don't say this to the person who had made the comment, but you haven't. You're just assuming. It's assumptions. You haven't lived it. You haven't implemented it. I have, and that's the difference. So and that's why I see success. I've had successes in that, and that's why I find benefits in that incentivizing change. Because you're right, there's going to be people who are resistant to change. But if you, again, I cannot stress this enough, if you show how they can benefit from it, how it's going to make their lives easier, you're going to get buy-in. Maybe not just in healthcare, but for any DC area, stay a long time, 1 or 2 hospitals, and won't learn. Hospitals and won't learn. Yeah, I get, and that's another thing. That's another conversation. I mean, this does go into that respect for people, in that you're going to have people that are in a hospital for 20 years, for example, right? Have a nurse in the hospital for 20 years. I'm going to bring in a new system. I'm going to bring in Salesforce. I'm going to bring in Epic. I'm going to bring in an ERP system. They have always written down stuff on pen and paper. Yes, you may not get that person to convert over, right? But again, you have to try your best, because that person is seen, that nurse that's been there for 20 years is seen as a leader just as much as the director is, right? And I think that nurse that's been there for 20 years has more influence than the director, right? So if you get that nurse in your corner, right? I think you're going to have more buy-in, more acceptance, right? So there may be, again, going back to respect for people, you may have to provide her or him or her with, more attention, in this particular change. But again, you need to continually stress how it's going to benefit that nurse. Excellent conversation. Excellent. Every business shares a common ground. Absolutely. And that's an excellent point where I've worked with organizations for the last 15 years. And every time I go in, they say, oh, we're different. No, you're not. I mean, I can tell you about 15 companies where who said that. And I just rattled off 5 supply chain problems. And they said, how did you know? Every company has the same exact problems, right? And I think, and it comes down to, the root of that is not demonstrating the why for change. That's why you see all these, or a number of organizations have failed projects. When we talk about failed technology projects, it's not the software. People hate SAP. It's not the software. I mean, the world's largest companies run SAP. It's the adoption, it's the implementation, it's the organizational change. That's the problem. Symptoms are often awesome, but you have to mold the crew. You have a molded crew. You are correct, and but the thing here is that organizational change, and within these programs. So once you get into an MBA program, that is the premise of, I would say, 60% of what you learn in the MBA program. It is that influence, it is that organizational change, it is that empowerment. So that's why you go through those different leadership competencies, those different leadership theories and approaches, right? So, are you going to be a transformational leader? Are you going to be a transactional leader? Are you going to be a servant leader? It depends on the organization. It depends on the industry. It depends on the culture. There's no one size fits all. And I would say the optimal leader is one that has a combination of those. So, for example, Amazon. The leaders of Amazon have to have some type of transactional leadership competency. Otherwise, Amazon wouldn't be the largest company in the world. You have to sell product to keep the doors open, right? Now, in other organizations, you need to have a transformational leadership competency where you don't need as much transactional leadership competencies. So again, it depends on the culture, it depends on the organization, it depends on the industry, it depends on the company's mission. Always stay fresh and present. Yep. So that to that point, whenever you say stay uh, fresh and present, there's one statement out there that says a competitive advantage is only temporary. So whenever you say always stay fresh and present, that kind of validates that point, because if I have a competitive advantage and my competitors see that, they're going to try their best to emulate it. Look at Uber and Lyft. You know, Lyft seen Uber was successful in the car sharing industry. Well, now here comes Lyft, right? And you've seen a number of different car sharing or applications that try to mimic that. So that competitive advantage is only temporary, and you're always going to have someone that's going to try to get a little piece of the pie. Yeah, mission statement should be clear. Absolutely. So going back to our lean production discussion, again, that Kanban is that visual signal. That's what I was referring to, that two-bin Kanban. There's other flavors of this Kanban where you could have Kanban lights to get a signal. So once I'm running low on my inventory, I can have a light to show the light up, and that that will trigger someone in the warehouse that that particular location or line needs to be replenished. And then you also have signs. So it's also referred to as Kanban cards. So I could have a Kanban board where people within purchasing can go review that board, 2 or 3 times a day, pull all those cards off, and then that's my pretty much my purchase requisition. That pretty much tells me what needs to be purchased. Now, with most ERP systems, we now have electronic Kanban boards where if I have a lean environment and I'm out of inventory, if I'm running low on inventory, I use a 2 bin system hypothetically, right? And that first box or bin runs out. I go into the ERP system that's in the kiosk on the manufacturing floor somewhere, and I click 2 buttons. That sends that notification to the purchasing department. They purchase a product. We're all good. We're ready to go. So that's kind of where we are today. That's where we're going in some environments. All organizations aren't there, but that's an easy way to implement, and that's just another option for in terms of a visual signal, the electronic Kanban board. Again, total quality management is where again the responsibility of quality falls into the entire organization and not just the quality department. One of the greatest tools that is used within total quality management is the voice of the customer, and I would say that this tool is one that can be easily and quickly implemented for free, right? Because of the social media outlets, it's just as simple as sending out a survey on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on IG, on Twitter, right? So now you get the voice of the customer for a particular offering, for a particular customer need, or for people to review a product or service, right? So you have the tools in place, you just have to implement them. The voice of the customer is one of the most important pieces in terms of total quality management. We talked about the respect for people. Those people are going to be what leads our inputs into making your processes more efficient. Um, I would say that another drawback from a leadership perspective is that they depend on their knowledge. They do not always get the input of those on the front lines. They do not get the input of those who are performing those processes every single day. So that is something that should be implemented within every organization, within every single process. We're going to talk about process maps and value stream maps, and I'm going to get to this in more detail. And that respect for people is going to lead to those continuous improvement initiatives. Again, you need to find a better way every day, even if you've just implemented a process. And we're going to get to that in more detail once we go to the DMAIC approach. And another thing that's important for the respect for people are the quality circles. So whenever we refer to quality circles, this is where you kind of have a interdepartmental group, interdisciplinary group, right? And the perfect example I use for this is that if I have a quality circle of engineers, I won't get anything done because they're always going to analyze, overanalyze, analysis paralysis, right? So you need to have a mixture of different characteristics, of different attributes. So going to Angela's point, you need to have people with different personalities and different strengths to be a part of these quality circles. So yes, I need an engineer for product development, but I also need someone with project management competencies so that we can get things done, right? So that's one thing that's very important whenever we're talking about quality circles. So going to the overview of the lean philosophy, we talked about the elimination of waste. So that elimination of waste is to eliminate those non-value added activities, those activities that do not provide value to the customer. They need to be eliminated. We need to take a broad view of the lean philosophy in that we need to look at the organization as a whole. We need to look at all facilities within my operational network. So if I have a distribution center of, so for example, Amazon has 60 or 70 different distribution centers in the US. So whenever they're looking at lean processes, they need to look at the broad spectrum of all distribution centers and say, if I'm implementing this lean process, is it going to be transferable to all 60 or 70 DCs? Right? So that's what we're referring to whenever we look at it from a broad view. We need to make it simple because Amazon has so many distribution centers. If they are going to implement a process, it needs to be simple so that everyone within each distribution center can implement them. Right? So that it's simple where I can hop on a Zoom call, explain it in 30 minutes to each DC manager, and it can be implemented. It's quick, it's easily understood, and it can be quickly implemented. Okay. Again, continuous improvement. We talked about that. To once we've implemented a process, we need to continue to find how we can improve on it. And visibility, it needs to be, that initiative needs to be visible. We need to promote it. So, for example, for our town hall meetings, for example, if we have performed an improvement initiative across all sites, we need to show it. We need to brag about it. We need to be happy about it. And then you also need to be flexible so we can adjust. It does not to be that change does not have cannot be rigid in nature. Although Amazon, operates under the same, although the DCs within Amazon, let me back up, operate under the same umbrella, because of demographics, because of cultures within the each facility, you may have to make small adjustments. So those particular initiatives need to be flexible so you can make those adjustments. Yep, don't forget out of the box thinkers. Yeah, so that is one of my mottos. I mean, actually, I just did an interview with Penn State uh, for the alumni chapter, and they normally ask, what is your career tip? And I came back and said, I say, challenge the status quo and think unconventionally. And she said, what? I said, that's what led to my success. I said, if you are a yes man, which I can't stand, for example, you do not contribute to the innovative thinking of the organization. That tunnel vision does not lead to these thoughts that could look for increased efficiencies from a lean perspective. So that's why I talk about where you want to challenge the status quo. You want to find better ways of performing processes. The status quo is what got the inefficiencies within the organization today. That's why I need to be challenged. And you as a leader need to think unconventionally. That's why you were hired. If we didn't want unconventional thinking, you wouldn't be hired. The same guy would still be in that position. You're there for a reason. So that's what I mean by, you need to think unconventionally, because this conventional thinking is what is going to lead to a MySpace, for example. That's what led MySpace to its demise, that conventional thinking. When Facebook came onto the scene, they wanted to stay within their mindset. They wanted to have that tunnel vision, and Facebook took over. Right? That's a perfect example because people my age can relate to that. I don't, some of you may not even heard MySpace, but MySpace was the largest company in the world, one of the largest companies in the world. and now Timberlake owns it. So let's talk about whenever you have the lean philosophy, need to be flexible, needs to be high level, needs to be simplistic, and you need to strive for continuous improvement. Partnering relationships. Let's see here. Partnering relationships are extremely important. Yes, Angela, you are absolutely correct. Without buy-in, it's just you're doomed for failure if you don't have buy-in. Innovation is talked about in union represented organizations are challenging. You are exactly correct on that one, Lauren, because I was in one organization. I think I shared this one with you all before. I was calling into one organization. They were trying to self implement an ERP application. They were union. I walk into the plant floor, desktops are broken. And it was because the union was resistant to change, and the union was not going to tell leadership who broke the desktops. And the root of the problem was that the owner just simply tried to force this new system down the union's throat. But again, once we did the Gemba walk together, and we told each individual of the union how this was going to make their job easier, they adopted to it. So instead of them walking literally about 2/10 of a mile about every 2 hours to report their production, they walk 3 steps, report their production on the new ERP system, and they're back to work. And because they were on a piece rate, which means that you get paid on how much you produce, they were all aboard. They were all on it. Because I don't have to walk so far, now I can produce more, I get paid more. Again, goes back to the why. Simple resolution. MySpace was awesome. All right, so we talked about the push versus pull system. Man, we're running late. We talked about the push versus pull system. Again, that push system is that forecasting based model where we are being proactive in guessing how much inventory we need. And that pull system is more where we're trusting the system based on that just in time lean approach. And that's going to lead to minimal inventory. So, yeah, Angela, for forecasting correctly, so I want to say that it is an understanding that forecasts are never correct. You're never, ever, ever going to get spot on your forecast. If you could, that company would be one of the largest companies in the world, right? So you try to minimize that forecasting error with the forecast. And I would say what we're experiencing right now, we are going to have high forecasting errors for probably the next year in all industries, no matter what. I don't think there's any way to get around it. There is research that we are currently working on right now to kind of smooth out these forecasting spikes that we're going to get that came in since March and are still coming in from organizations. Because I think we're now getting at normal production levels. After 5 months now. So those forecasting numbers so again, think about a manufacturer who has thousands of parts, and none of those forecasts are correct. So it's a huge undertaking to look at what the system is telling them what they need to purchase and say, okay, how far is this off? How much did the pandemic impact this forecast? Right? And if we do it for thousands of items, we would never get done. So you have to make that managerial decision as to, okay, which items are we going to analyze, because we cannot analyze all of them. Okay. But the implementation of that situation is essential right now for those who are trying to achieve commission. So for those commissions, organizations need to make adjustments, because yes, they're going to try to make their commission and sell their commission, but then you're compounding the issue. Yes, I understand that those salespeople are trying to make up for, whenever production was shut down, but you're compounding the problem. If I'm overproducing and the customer cancels the order, now my company is in worse shape. So now they might have to potentially have layoffs, right? So those and all these are excellent, amazing points, and these are supply chain problems that we're dealing with right now. And that's why this discipline is so very important. Exactly what you're talking about. So we talked about the elimination of waste, and waste. That term waste is not just for inventory; it's for process, transportation, move, defects, and overproduction. Let's see here. So it's a whole new world for it being for business models based on base. So yeah, so the business models indeed have transitioned, business models have switched, and supply chain partnerships have changed and shifted. Um, I said in a previous discussion where there was one survey where I think between 50 and 60% of supply chain managers said that they're moving their supply chain network more within the U.S. as opposed to China. So that's where we're at whenever we're looking at our supply chain network. So I'm going to try to just go for 10 minutes longer. I know that some of you have another class. I know that Tim normally has another class. So for Lean Six, so you might hear of the term Lean Six Sigma, where Lean and Six Sigma are actually two different things. Yeah, see you, Tim. So although Lean, the objective is to reduce waste, the objective of Six Sigma is to reduce variation. Okay, so we want to reduce variation from a process perspective. So if it takes me 2 hours one time to perform something and an hour and 30 minutes to produce the same exact task the next time, we have a problem. Okay, so Six Sigma uses statistical approaches to kind of reduce that variation from that 2 hour time limit, that 2 hour process to an hour and 30 minutes, and try to kind of make it more aligned. So one of my favorite tools is the DMAIC approach. So DMAIC stands for define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. And I like to use a healthcare example. I use this healthcare example I like it a lot. So I've kind of made it better as time has went on. So if I'm looking at a DMAIC approach for an emergency room, if I define what the problem is, I first have to map out. So I'll do a process map. We're going to get the process maps. I'm trying to combine it because we're running out of time. I'm going to do a process map where I'm going to lay out each step of the process. So my first step is that the patient checks in with the receptionist, right? Second step is that patient will get triaged where they are asked what their symptoms are, get their weight, their blood pressure, and things like that. Once they get their weight and blood pressure, then they sit in the waiting room. Once they sit in the waiting room, then they get taken to the back where they sit for maybe an hour for the doctor to come in. Once the doctor comes in, he diagnoses the patient, and then the patient gets discharged. So if we look at this, we can say the define is that we think that the bottleneck is that the patient is waiting an hour for the doctor. Okay. And in order to validate that, we have to measure that. So now we have to measure 10 patients. And are all of these 10 patients indeed waiting an hour for the doctor? Okay. Once we have collected that data, we now have to analyze that data. And once we've done the analysis, we say, oh man, it's taking an hour and 10 minutes to wait for the doctor. So then once we have validated that, now we're going to look to improve upon that process. And we can do that by interviewing doctors, nurses, patients, and a number of people. So once we have identified the proposed solutions, then we could just say that, okay, our solution is, okay, bring in another doctor. Or we could say, okay, we can have the nurse look at a knowledge base to have similar symptoms, which can be done through artificial intelligence, and find a list of proposed diagnosis that the doctor can review and approve. And once we have put those in place, then we can control it. So now that we have that new process in place, now we can say, okay, is it improving our patient wait time? Okay, we reduced it. We reduced it to 45 minutes. Okay, that's an improvement. Now let's strive for continuous improvement. Now let's get down to 30 minutes. Now let's get down to 20 minutes. And it is a iterative process in that we need to continuously look to reduce that number. Okay, and that is essentially the DMAIC approach. Telemedicine has seriously benefited our family. Yep. So telemedicine, yep, that is a big part. I actually have one student in the master's program that they actually started a telehealth company for the pandemic, and are doing very well. I'm actually working with them on developing artificial intelligence algorithms, so that they can indeed do what I just said, develop a knowledge base, for symptoms, so that it can have their owner, which is a doctor, to kind of have a list, a kind of a checklist to use to kind of become more efficient and more accurate in diagnosing patients. So, although you could say that it's a benefit out of the pandemic where it's creating new opportunities, this the situation we're in right now has kind of created brand new industries. You know, so yeah, Angela, without exposure, absolutely. So I think that the reliance on technology will actually be beneficial moving forward, because there's new use cases that have emerged, and those use cases are transferable to different industries. Okay, so I'm going to use one more slide here. Let me see here. So we talked about process mapping. And one thing I forgot to mention with process mapping is that whenever you do a process map, it's for one process and it's not for the entire organization. Okay. So again, a process from the emergency room, from check-in to discharge, right? It's not the process for the entire hospital. With a value stream map, the value stream map takes that process map a next step, an additional step, in that you're going to map out all those steps that we talked about, but you're also going to put in how long each process takes in minutes, right? You're also going to map out what the percentage of time that process is complete and accurate. Okay, whenever you do that, now you're able to easily identify what your bottlenecks are within that process. Where talking through it, you may not be able to see that. It may not be as obvious as our previous example was, right? So you might have to put those times down on paper. You may have to interview a number of different people within the organization to understand how long it takes for a process to complete. You may have to understand how long it takes for that process to sit before that next process can be picked up. So this value stream map is a great tool in that it maps out that current state. It gives you the bottlenecks, and then the next step of the process of the value stream map is you map out the future state. Once you have identified the future state, then you go through the exercise again to put how long these processes are taking, the percentage complete and accurate, and now you can begin to measure the improvement. Okay, so the value stream, so you have the process map, step one. The current state value stream map is a step two, and then that future state value stream map is a third step. and you're continuously trying to improve on that future state value stream map to reduce waste, to get those times down, to increase that percent complete and accurate. Okay. So that's where we're going to stop at tonight. I'm going to take one last look at the chats. Telemedicine has been beneficial. We would talk about that. Every 3 months and be able to talk to the doctor much better than not having an appointment. Absolutely. Yeah, telehealth is huge. I'm trying to remember the name of that company he started. I think somebody's typing. Let me see if I can look it up real quick. That's pretty sad. I'm working on the can't remember the name. Life in general has been a huge adjustment. Absolutely, it's been an adjustment. But I mean, I'm a technology guy. So I've been preaching, distance education for years. People were against it. People are still against it right now, but it's the future. I mean, as a matter of fact, I think University of Arizona just bought Ashford University because they have realized the importance of distance education. So that's where yes, we're in distance education right now, but that's where the area of higher education is going. And that's going to be the same for this telehealth. People are going to stay with this telehealth offering. They don't want to go to first off, they don't want to go to doctors anyway, right? And now that telehealth is now an option, people are going to stay with it. Especially the elderly. They don't want to get up. They don't want to get up and go out. They didn't want to go out before COVID. Now they sure don't want to go out, right? So there's new areas that have been introduced with this pandemic, and I think that, and especially so within a supply chain perspective, we have seen a big bump in terms of automation from an industrial automation. So robotics for moving pallets, robotics for counting inventory, robotics for producing items with the assistance of workers. So again, it's here to stay. Industrial automation is here to stay. I always say iRobot is here. So and that's one thing that I have actually since March. I have probably went in all in terms of industrial automation and the research and how it's going to impact the supply chain industry. So with that, again, thank you for attending tonight's session. Thank you for your engagement. Like I said, this is kind of, over these 5 weeks, is probably the best engagement that I've had in terms of the chats. It is very good. I always say that, if I can have enough engagement where I can stay on the same PowerPoint for 20 minutes, I'm doing my job. I'm successful. That's a good discussion. I like the engagement. I hope that it is beneficial to your roles in organizations and providing examples of your peers' environments, in that I think that you're going to be able to remember that and retain that information as compared to a listen to me lecture for an hour. Okay. So once again, I'm going to go through the chats. Stephanie, that's fine. That's fine. We talked last night, so you're good. So Angel, you are correct that you're never going to replace workers, in that you still need workers to. So with machine learning, for example, someone needs to develop those algorithms. Someone needs to develop those use cases, right? Programmers don't know all the use cases that a worker has to do. Programmers aren't going to know all the use cases for so we're talking about robot process automation, RPA, and business process automation, BPA. Business process automation, think about invoicing, think about cutting purchase orders. So those people who have done that for years and years and years have to tell the programmers, okay, this is one use case that has to get done. This is one scenario that has to happen. This is another scenario that has to happen. Okay, whenever the pricing's not wrong, what's a robot going to do? So you have all of those things. The robot is just a tool. It's not going to take over a job. Okay, so and I don't think it's ever going to get there. I could be wrong, but I don't think it's not going to get there in our lifetime. I'll put it that way. I'll put it that way. But I mean, we're very early into the process. It's just now picking up. Artificial intelligence has been around since the 50s. Robotic process automation has been around since the 50s. Robots have not been introduced into manufacturing until the 80s, right? So we're talking 40 years ago. We were talking about we're introduced to stuff, and we still haven't perfected it yet. So we have a long way to go. And I think that the biggest risk for so I'm writing a textbook for the University of Germany on industrial automation, and my biggest fear, which is the biggest part of the book, is cybersecurity. So once we bring in all of these different robots from different vendors doing different processes, how are they going to integrate? If they don't talk to each other, now someone can go and hack one of these robots, and now we have a problem. Right. So I think that's the next step in this whole industrial automation and robotics discussion. So Lauren, I'm glad it transferred, and that's my goal, to make it transferable. Juan, I'm glad you yep, haven't seen them yet, Stephanie. It's pretty nasty out. Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed the course. All right, so yeah, I'm glad this has been beneficial. I'm going to send out my information within the assignment feedback. But whenever you get a chance, go on LinkedIn, connect with me, and that I'm like daily. I'm posting stuff in terms of supply chain management, in terms of especially now in higher education. But and also I have a number of podcasts coming up with a number of thought leaders within the industry. So if this supply chain management discipline is something that you're interested in, like I said, reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn, and also connect with me on LinkedIn and connect with TEDx PSU Wilkes-Barre, WILKESBARRE. It's also on my LinkedIn profile. Connect with it, follow it, because we're going to have a huge lineup, and that TED Talk is something, and I'm very, very, very excited about that. And if you have any questions, reach out to me, and I will still be talking to you on the discussion board. Thanks, and have a great night. All right, LaShawn, I'll check that message. You're welcome, Stephanie. I'll ping you next time. I'll ping you whenever the weather's better. Stay safe because the hurricane's getting pretty crazy.